Hello, Ethan. I'm just going to mute myself for a little bit, waiting for people to show up. Please post any questions that you have while we're doing this, and I'll also pause the recording for the time being. I'm going to get going in a second now. I've got to figure out how all this stuff works. Let's see how we're doing. You guys can see my split 2D CPP file, correct? Hopefully. Yep. Okay. Nice. Okay. That's twice the size, or like one big programming assignment. I can't really answer that. I will say that you can't expect people to do an exam on you can't expect people to do an assignment on an exam. Now that's my philosophy that I've been going with for a very long time. I'm learning to reevaluate some of my assumptions about how long students have for particular assignments and exams. Northeastern they had 4 courses for one. They also liked pain, it seems. So there's a difference in terms of how many hours students are expected to work or expecting to work for an assignment or whatever the case is. I know at Northeastern, you certainly couldn't expect, if an assignment's an 8-hour assignment, you cannot give that for an exam, clearly. If you're talking, and I also wouldn't be able to give you something that is, that can be broken up into little chunks, right? The worst thing I could do is give you one big monstrous problem and say, go do it on an exam. Because if you fell off the path at anywhere along the lines, you get 0 suddenly. That's terrible, right? So what you would expect to see is, even if the question builds on itself, you get little bits at a time, and each of those little bits are sort of self-contained. That's ideal. And you would expect to have me ask you to think on your feet. That's a given, but it's not so think on your feet that you would not be expected to be able to come up with it during that period of time. So a Google interview is infamous for think on your feet. And if you can't think on your feet or can't come up with a solution, they'll try and guide you back onto the solution because it's sort of this give and take. On an exam, you can't have that give and take. So it can't be a hard enough question that I expect to stump people. It can be a hard enough question that if you've done the assignments, you should automatically get it. But people that didn't do the assignments can't do it. That's a reasonable question. But I cannot ask something. I wouldn't ask something like the printing 2D array thing here that I'm going to do as an example, because I've shown it in class or in the videos. It would be fair game, but it's still on the cusp. Coming up with the Wheel of Fortune, Wheel of Torture question that you guys had. I think that's fair game, right? I mean, it might seem crazy, but when you think about it, you go, well, wait, all we're doing is going character by character. When I find an uppercase, when I find a consonant, change it to an underscore. Everything else, leave it alone. Go character by character through the entire line. That seems fairly reasonable, right? That's not really crazy. And if you're off by a little bit, like you don't do a dynamic array, you wouldn't lose all your points. You'd lose some points. So that's what you should expect on an exam. And they're going to be a little parts, and it's going to cover all the different materials, but it's going to be things like, it's not going to be, how would you use string comparison? It would be, use string comparison to do this test, or even not even telling you to use string comparison, but compare these 2 strings, see which one comes first in the alphabet. Or maybe you're expected to use string length to figure out how long something is, which I think we had on the last exam, if you didn't notice. Some people missed that, and that's fine. You lost a point or 2. Where you're supposed to go through the entire string, and you're supposed to find the character with that was the most common. Well, how do you know how long the string is? You don't need that passed in. You can't just say 100 because you don't know how long the string is. The answer is to use string length and walk down the string and figure how long the string length is, and then walk down the string. You can also have a go to when you find that /0 at the end, but I would use a string length just in case, because string length may have something preventing it from going off the rails. If it goes over 5,000 characters, return -1 or something like that. That sort of thing. Okay, so here's my plan of attack. And I would love it if you guys would speak up. I know it's challenging, but you don't talk as much as me. But my plan of attack right now is to talk about, I'm expecting people to maybe having problems with having a multiple file project or multiple files in their code, because we always have that problem every year. So if that's not a problem for you guys, I'm more than happy to stick with whatever else you want to ask me about. But otherwise, what I was planning on doing is going through yet another example of how I'd pull out my code, put into multiple files, and also look at macros or pre-compiler instructions, proper term for it, pre-compiler instructions in your code, because that's also fair game on the exam, including bit shifts technically, which we can look at in a second if you want. We can look at defines, we can look at bit shifts, we can look at macro functions might work as well. There's a bunch of things. Now, this is just code I just blindly grabbed from the class code that we have online already. I do believe, I know I closed it already. I think it was called like lecture 12 2D array or something like that. It's in the class code. So if that's okay with you guys, maybe I can get you guys to speak up if there's something you really want to go over. But what I was going to do is pull this into multiple files, make another class essentially, or another set of files. It's not a class. We're not doing that yet, 2400. And then we'll play with some bit shifting stuff. And then I'll look at some code quality things. Actually, let's look at some code quality things here first. So you can either chat or you can turn on your microphone and say, what do you think is wrong with this code? There's lots of things that are wrong with this code. What would you do differently about this code? And I'll wait. I'm happy to wait all day here. Someone speak up. There's something wrong with this. You know why I know something wrong with it? Because I can think of about 20 things that I did wrong here that I would not do normally. I'm not going to be offended, even though it's my code.
Well, for starters, I think the variable names aren't very clear.
Great. What don't you like about them?
AA underscore floats. I don't know what that is referring to.
What am I using the A underscore? That's a purely style decision on my part. Some companies do it as well. What's the A stand for?
I'm pretty sure you're using it to mean array.
Yeah, because otherwise you don't know it's a pointer or an array. Or an array. So I put that in there to say, hey, it's an array. It's an array of arrays. That's the AA.
Oh, okay.
And it's an array of floats. And I had no other name. You want to come up with I would more than happy. You're absolutely right.
Sounds
Floats
good.
is a terrible name. Floats, terrible, right? AA I stick by, but the word floats, you can go with something better than that, right?
Because it's like, yeah, all it says is that, hey, it's numbers. It doesn't really say anything else.
Because there was nothing really special in
Yeah, I guess that's true.
An array of arrays. But yeah, you could say, let's say a grades, right? An array of grades. Sure. So it could be all the grades for each one of my courses that I teach.
Yep.
So
yeah. The next thing I see is that in the for loop, maybe instead of it I is less than 6, do I is less than a string length of the array.
Can I do that?
Can you do that?
No, I can't. That's the problem. I am hard coding in the number 6, but the better solution, and you bring up a very good point,
to make a variable for the size.
Courses, yeah. And I should call it courses, right? Why all caps? It's not screaming. It's saying this is a constant, so you don't accidentally mix it up with a variable. So you don't try and set this to something. If I see it's all caps, I'm not even trying to set it. It's just a standard that we've sort of come up with over the years. Let's say it's 6, and then constant int, and this is really a terrible course. There's only 3 students in the class, but because you're absolutely right. That way, if you do need to change something around later, you can, which is kind of important. Number of students, courses. And that's the number of students. Okay, and this is some random malloc thing. So let's put that on. I want to put all my constants together so I can see them again. What is this? Terrible name. I guess that might be a terrible name as well, but given the fact this is some weird toy example, we'll use it that way. Okay. And I'm looking for 10s. I'm looking for, I already have test height and test width, which we're going to use later on. Do I have any more 6s or anything like that, or 3s? No. Great. Those would be perfectly good things to point out. Other things I might want, I should have a header comment for each function. Know what the function is. Now the main is different. The main, everyone knows what the main is for. They should. And you can get cutesy and you can get like little patterns and stuff like that. But what does this print 1D array do? Outputs the contents of a 1D array. Something like that. And what I would also maybe say something like numbers as the number of columns in the array, something like that. Yeah, and you can keep on going from there. Comments are, one student just contacted me on Discord and said, what if the code looks fantastic? I don't know what it does though. And my comment was, how do you think it's fantastic then? If you don't understand what the code is doing, well, it could be not enough experience. That's fine. That's, it's your first time programming for a lot, or for many, many people. The better thing to do would be say like, okay, should it be obvious? No, you don't have to say things like this would be, let me show you a really terrible one. There we go. Terrible comment. Prints out /n. Terrible comment. What does it tell me? And I've seen lots of students in this class do that, right? Makes a variable and sets it to 4. I do not need to see that. I can read that. Would a reasonable person that programs at all be able to read your code and go like, I know that that thing does? You're trying to make it so it's obvious to another person, especially somebody else that knows how to program. If it's not obvious, it needs a comment. If it is obvious, you can leave it alone. That's sort of the, and obvious is all relative, but as you get more and more proficient, things will be a lot more terse because you have less to comment, but your functions will be more elaborate. Therefore, you would need more things, like you might need more explanation in your comments. But comments are not sort of optional. They are sort of, it'll compile without it. But 2 months from now, the standard, my line in the sand is 2 months from now, if you look at this, will you understand what it says? And you might think you will. I almost guarantee you will not for almost anything that you do. It is shocking how badly we remember what our code actually does 2 months later. So let me see if we have another example. Is there anything else in here? Well, that's looking pretty bad, but it's not that bad. It's pretty bad. useless comment here, for example. It's commented out code because I didn't want to use it anymore. I just want to temporarily turn it off. I should clean that up. How about, let's go back down here. Anything else that you guys dislike? And rather than Maurice, Paul, Noah, or Ethan calling you out here, anything that you guys dislike in this code? So do you just log in and just wait, or are you actually listening? Oh. Okay, I'll let the chat go. Fine. Right. Anything yet? Essentially, if you cannot be terrible and mean to another person, you're not doing it right. Just like English, right? If you write an English essay, no matter what, someone can chastise it. Even if the person's a published author, there's probably something you can find in there like, oh, you didn't need that word over there, right? You can be really nitpicky if you want. That's fine. That's the thing. It takes practice, but this is why we're doing this practice. Let's see. There you go. That's a great one. The question is, what the hell is val or bitwise or 1-1? What is that thing? So that's the question. What is this? And the answer is, it was designed as a question, as a little test thing, and I sure as heck should be putting some kind of comment in there. What am I trying to show there? So I would have to break this down myself personally if I'm looking at this, and it's been like a month since I wrote this code or longer, so I don't even remember what the heck this does. This is a 1 bit shifted to the left, meaning I essentially multiplying it by 2. So that thing is equal to the value 2. That's what that bit shift does. Okay, it is val bitwise or 2. And so what I could say is the 2's bit on for val. That's actually what this is testing. That's actually going to be testing. It's one or the other. It will actually turn. It's not testing whether it is. It is saying it's an or. So it's going to turn on the 2's bit for val. That's what that thing is doing. If it's already on, nothing happens. And if it's not on, so this is the value 2 and a bitwise or for 47 and 2. With a bitwise or, it says if that bit is on, it will be, if the bit was on before, it stays on. If the bit was not on before, but it's in this one, it will be, it'll turn it to on. So what is 47 as a binary number? Let's figure that out. So I might want to comment on this one. 32 plus, what else do I have in 47? Is that a 16? Will I be able to get a 16 in there? No, that's 38, right? And 15? 32 plus 15, 47. Right, there you go. So that ends up being plus 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1. In that case, val's not going to change. If I have 47 as a binary number, it is, let me write it out here, 1 0 0 1 0 1 2 3 4. As a base 2 number, that's what 47 is. And then what I'm doing is I'm checking this bit here to see if it wasn't on before, it is on now because this is a 2. It's 2 or this. I go bit by bit, checking these, matching these bits up. There's an entire lecture on this thing. Seeing what those, if there's no match, if let's say if I had a 0 here, then it would suddenly become a 1. So that's what this thing is actually doing. And I should sure as heck have a comment in it. Look at that thing. That's nasty. That's why we make sure we have comments in there. So, and now we could check to see, oh, right here, this should always be true, by the way. Right now, that bit should now be on. And I'm checking to see if that 2, the 2's bit is on. Check if the 2's bit is on for val. This will turn on the bit flip with an OR. Anding it will check to see, it'll become true. This will be either 0 if the 2's bit's off, or it will be something not 0 if the 2's bit is on. That's what we're testing. And this is turn off the 2's bit in val. That's what that thing does. And what I probably should have is, instead of putting the word the 2's bit everywhere and stuff like that, what I should have is something like, let's take this thing out. And this goes right back to what we're doing with macros or pre-compilation instructions. Let's put it up here, actually. Or 2's bit. 2's. That thing. So instead of putting that thing in here, I'm saying it's the 2's bit. I want to give, or whatever word I want to use it, something that I'm going to remember when I'm looking at this thing. And so every time I see this, instead of just putting this 1 - this, let's just put 2's bit everywhere. It will be the same thing. It's just saying, okay, I have something wrong. Undefined. It says undefined, but it's not undefined. Okay, and this thing right here. I'll just have to look at what the heck this does. Define the 2's bit. That should do it. So what's wrong with that? Oh, I think it's because it's not allowed to start 2's bit. There you go. That's what the problem was. I could have done a find and replace. That would have been smart. All right. Is that actually compiling? Hopefully. I'm not seeing where my compilation is. Error list. Output. I think I moved this down too much. Okay. There we go. All right. Up to date. Error skipped. Okay. So what I should see is, if I run, I should be able to run my program. In fact, nothing should have changed from the previous version I ran of my program. There you go. Great. It does what I wanted to do originally. This is what my program did in one of my earlier lectures. It is actually saying the location of something and the value in that field. Location of, here is the, I guess, the 1 column, 0 row, and the value is 1. Or is it -1? It's 1. Okay. The 2's column, 0 row gives you a 2. The 3's column, 0 row gives you a 3, and back and forth. Here is my printing out the same thing again with a different way of doing a 2-dimensional array. And here is me doing it a third way. I have 3 different ways of doing 2-dimensional arrays with this example that I have here. And I'm just showing you all three of those examples. But there are things like, do I use this bit shift blah, 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 blah? Or can I make it easier on myself? So I could do something like this. Define choose on, and then val, and then this is going to be val or choose bit. All right. And instead of this, or I could call it a different name. I'm just coming up with a variable name here, or function. It's not a function. It's a pre-compiled instruction, but I could have made it into a function. And so I could do something like this. There you go. Everything should still work. It's actually doing this. I want to make it so that it's obvious, even if the code works correctly. When someone looks at your code, I'm not saying this does it perfectly, but when someone looks at your code, they should know exactly what that thing does. And in fact, this comment should now be probably brought up all the way up here to what this thing here does. And a binary number, something like that. You're trying to make it obvious if you can. It's not always obvious, but as obvious as you can make it. Okay, that's the first pass. That's what we were talking about when it comes to coding. And let's see if you had other comments, because that would, these were good comments. Okay. Yeah, and the not of this, what the heck is that doing? Do we have a not of that, or is it a tilde? A tilde, it's a bitwise negation. Let's see what we have here. There you go. That's a tilde, meaning it will take every bit in the original number. If it was a 0, it becomes a 1. If it was a 1, it becomes a 0. It's a bit, it just flips everything over. And then we say, and that. And so instead of all zeros and a 1 in one place, it becomes all ones and a 0 in that place. And then if I do an and on that, it means every bit stays the same except for that one bit. That one bit is now suddenly going to become a 0. And so I've turned off that bit. I can do all sorts of really crazy bit tricks. And if you're wondering, why the heck would I ever need this? There's no point to this. Oh my God, why are we wasting our time with bit tricks? If you ever looked at a subnet mask, you will see bit tricks. If you've ever used a mouse event, you've used bit tricks. They're everywhere. You just don't know that they're everywhere. They're in a lot of code, especially when you're talking about anything with a network. People love bit masks. It's actually why your IP address looks the way it does, and how you have a subnet mask and why it works, because you're doing bitwise operators to get ands or the ors of something. Okay, so that's the first part. Next part, the actual assignment. Let's have a look at what we're going to do. My plan of attack is this. I want to pull out all the code that does not relate. I'm going to overdo it. For the assignment, I'm saying pull out the code involving file IO, file input and output. But what if I just pull out everything involving 2D arrays? So this thing really does, this function, this split2d.cpp, really doesn't have anything in it. In fact, I wanted to just rename this thing here. Called split2d main. Right. I want to make a brand new file that does all of this heavy lifting for me. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a function called test2d arrays, and I'm going to move everything over there. So let me move this here. Let me put I'm going to make it a prototype. Okay, that should do it. And now I want to move, I have the split 2D arrays thing. I'm going to put that down here. I'm going to define my function. And in fact, this entire function is going to do pretty much jack and squat other than this. It's just going to literally be, I'm going to rip out all of this code, plop it into a new function. Why? Because I can, just to see it in action. Okay. And instead of doing all of this stuff with main, I'm just going to call this test bed, this function that does a bunch of testing. And when I'm done, let's return 0. Again, I didn't do anything. I just moved stuff around. I took the code that was in my main, dumped it some other place, and then just called this other function. Because I wanted it in one spot. Okay. In fact, I could probably take out all of these things as well. Okay. This should still work, by the way. If it doesn't, well, we get problems. Unless I was already running code here. I may have been already running code. Let's stop it and see. Oh my God, what's going on with this? No, that did it. God love it. Okay. One more time, because this was, there you go. Code still works. Great. Now the next part. I'm going to make a new pair of files, a header file, which just has the constants, the things that are not going to change on me, and the prototypes, all these, how the function should be called. The idea is with a header file, I should be able to just look at the header file and know exactly what this code does. I don't have to see all this gory, ugly crap in here. I don't have to read this. I just want to know, oh, there's a function called test2D arrays. I have a function called print1D array. I have a function called print2D array and print2ds array. That's all I want. I want those function names. So the header file, I literally can pass off to other people to use. That's actually what you're doing when every time I had, let me see here, assert.h. The assert code is written somewhere else. It's compiled. I can't even look at that code, but the header file is perfectly okay for me to look at. And I can look at that header file and I know what it looks like and can see what the functions are. I can do a lot of other stuff with it. I can actually figure out what my options are with a header file. It's just like the table of contents, if you will. What does this book look like? I can look through the table of contents, see what kind of topics are covered. Or the textbook is a better example for that. The actual code, the actual functions that are being defined, they're written somewhere else. Okay. So let's call it add. I'm going to add it 2 different parts. So I'm going to add a header file first. No, that's not what I want. Let's see it this way. New item should do it. There we go. And let's call it test2D array. Add it. All right. That pragma once comes for free. I'll tell you what the heck that does in a second, but we'll hopefully see it in a second. I'm going to take all of this stuff, why the heck not, rip it all out, and I'm going to throw that in the 2D array. All right. I should be able to notice asserts and IOStream. They're in your main library, so they have the they have the angled parentheses. If it's local, I need to put it in quotes. So quotes are for local, angled are for libraries. Okay, and this name of the file is test2d array.h. It should be okay with it. There we go. Everything compiled again. Hey, everything still's working. All I did was say, I'm going to put this in another file. And when I include this file here, It's taking the entire contents of test2darray.h, ripping it out, text and all that text, dumping it right there on this line right here. So everything that what's in this file gets inserted right at this line. That's what it's doing. So the order that this happens actually makes a difference, but that's what's happening. When I include that header file, I just take it and I plop it up there. Okay, we're going to do one more thing just to make it more confusing. I'm going to add one more file, add a new item. I'm going to make a CPP file, and I'm going to make it the same name as my header file. And that's going to be test2darray.cpp. It doesn't do anything right now. To test2darray.h. I'm going to include the header file here. It's not going to do anything, but I'm going to include my header file. In fact, I can run it right now, and this should still compile. Here's the kicker with this. So I have these two CPP files. They will be processed in whatever the heck order the compiler wants it to be processed. That's the problem with CPP files. Well, that's the problem with compiling in C++. There is no rhyme or reason. You can do it properly, that you can do the particular order. That's why people have make files, but you shouldn't rely on that. So as sort of a defensive cover your backside approach to programming, people have gotten into the habit of you compile it, and whatever order this gets compiled in, it should still work. Okay. So I'm going to take all of the code I've written, everything other than main. I'm going to rip it out. Let's put that into here. And I'm going to take the next part here and right here. We'll rip this out too. And I'm going to pop down here. I'm going to compile. Assert is not found. Right? Why? Because it's in this thing here. So let's make sure all my asserts and everything are covered. I'm going to put those in my header file. Why? Because, well, I only want to include it once. Both these files are including that header file, or whatever order it comes in. So I'll put my includes in the header file. So I'm guaranteed that I'm going to include everything only once. I don't have to worry about order of operations. Okay. Notice what I have here. Everything works. Everything runs as before. And yet, here's my main file. There's nothing in it. I can have stuff in it, but the key is I can remove chunks of my code that sort of need to go together conceptually, right? If I have all this stuff that only involves 2D arrays and I don't want to have to spread out over my entire code base, I put all my functions and stuff involving 2D arrays in one place. Much like, where do I put my tools? I put my tools in my tool shed, or I put my tools in the basement in my toolbox in the basement with all my other power tools and stuff like that. Where do I put my cooking supplies? They're all in the kitchen in particular locations, right? I have a plan. I organize my life. You organize your life in a variety of different ways as well, right? Everything involving the television is right next to the television in a particular order and particular structure, I presume. And so we're doing the same thing. I'm going to pull all the stuff that is not related, that it's related to each other, plop into some other set of files. The header file says these are the functions I'm going to be dealing with so that other people can use them. It says, by the way, foreshadowing, I am going to have a function called this at some point in time. By the way, I have a constant called this. By the way, I have a macro called this. I have another macro called this. I can tell the compiler what some constants perhaps, maybe make a struct in here, do my prototypes, the declaration of my functions in here, right? I'm saying there will be a function called this, 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 and this. Somewhere else, I need to define that. Oh, wait, I defined it right here. Here they are. Here are my functions. Let me see here. Test 2D arrays, one function. Here's my other function. Here's my third function. Right. So I can pull that code out. I put my prototypes in here. I put my definitions in here. I put my actual function definitions in here in a separate place. So they match up to each other, right? The functions are declared here. They're defined over here. They're always in lockstep. And then other classes can use it. And it doesn't really hurt. This knows about a function called test 2D arrays. Doesn't know anything else, but it knows about this function called test 2D arrays. It also is including the header file, so it gets all of those declarations, and then it links those up afterwards. So when after I compile, there's a linking phase. So wherever this declaration is, it links it up to where the definition is in the CPP file, and now I'm off to the races. Okay, that was a lot to take in all at once, but I wanted to get through it. So let's see if I can unpack something for you guys. What's going on? What you're doing for the assignment is figuring out what functions you want to pull out, because I told you anything involving file IO should be pulled out. You'll be putting the declarations in a header file, the definitions in a CPP file, the same name. They don't have to be, but why not? And all of your files will include the header file. That way, every file knows about all the other files. Because this will be compiled at some time. This will be compiled at some time. I don't know which one's going to be compiled first, but they both access this thing. And as a result, they know about the common functions that they can all refer to. It allows me to organize my information. All right. Let's see what other questions you guys have. I had other questions. I didn't give you a chance to ask lots of questions. So, and while I'm waiting for you guys, I'm also going to look at what we did so far. We did code quality, and we talked about bit shifts so far. But I'll wait for questions from you guys because that was a lot to take in, but at the same time, hopefully it made sense. And if it didn't, that's what I'm here for. I want to answer those questions. Well, let's see if it's okay, you guys are awfully quiet, and I know that it seems like you're afraid of asking a dumb question, I presume, or you're confused and you don't want to ask the wrong question. I almost guarantee you, if you're going to ask the wrong question, other people would ask the same wrong question. So I want to actually know. Do we have other people? Or is this just like one-on-one time? It's almost one-on-one time. Okay. Okay, let me ask you this then. What's the difference between these two? Oh, great. We have a question. Oh, that made sense. Good for you then, Maurice. Because a lot of people get very confused by this. I mean, when I hit 2400, every term I start with that, having multiple files. And people that were not my students freak the heck out. They just melt down and panic because they're used to one file where everything is. And most C and C++ code does not work that way, because otherwise you'd have one C file with 50,000 lines of code in it. It's very neat. I love it, but it becomes unattainable. It becomes a pain in the bum. Yeah, that's a technical term. A pain in the bum when you try and have like 50,000 lines of code in one file. speaking unfortunately from experience, even 10,000 lines of code in one file is too much code in one file. And so separating it out and sort of organizing your code is the way that keeps you sane. Let's see, have a look at something here. I want to see how many lines of code this thing is. Okay, 159 lines of code. It might seem like a lot, not a lot comparatively. When we're talking like 5,000, 6,000 lines of code in one file, you can imagine how much scrolling that involves. You have like a little tiny snippet of a thumb over here, and that's about it. So let's go back to what I was asking before. What's the difference between those two? Can you guess? And I might be wrong, by the way. So you're probably going to be right no matter what you answer. So these two things here. That would be true. You're absolutely right. Unless, of course, C does something on the background and I don't even know about it. C does a lot of weird stuff in the background. Like if you use, I think if you use a constant, it will actually, it might do just convert it over to one of these preprocessor things to speed up things. But other than that, from a U standpoint, it's making a variable that's a constant that you can't change, or it's making a constant that you cannot change, and it's keeping it as a name like a variable would. And the other one is just just a preprocessor thing. So if I put in something like, oh, let me see here, I'm allowed. The error is not there. The error ends up being everywhere else but where the error actually is, because it'll replace this test with the word hello here and everywhere else that is, and I'll get 5,000 errors for one error. I made one mistake one time, right? I call it, let's say 5.7. What was our number anyways? I might have to undo a bunch of times. There we go, 4. So like 4.5. And I'll get an error here, 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 here. And if you don't know what that error is, you'll get, 50 errors, and you won't know why you got 50 errors, because it is hot swapping this word with 4.5 everywhere. This one is a constant, and you say it's an integer constant. And if I put 5.5, let's say put 5.5, what happens? Where's my error? I should get my error right there, actually. I'm surprised it didn't yell at me yet. Let's just switch this up and see what happens. Oh, because it's in a header file. Oh, what the heck? Test height. No. I'm surprised test height hasn't blown up or yelled at me yet. That should be, let's just change things around a bit. No, that's fine. I thought for sure I had to have, I had to leave this as blank. Static 2D arrays are a pain. I thought this for sure would actually yell at me, because I'm saying it's an integer. You gave me something that's not an integer. You should go away, right? That's no. You shouldn't be allowed to do that. I'm surprised it allowed me at all to compile. It's allowing me to compile just fine. I have no idea why it's allowing me to compile, unless I'm not actually using that variable. Let's see. Test height. Oh, test height's in there. It's allowing me to have a 4.5. Okay, that's blowing me away. I have no idea what's going on here. F, no. Yes, I'm going to leave it alone for that. The point being, what I thought was going to be a great example is because it has a variable type, I can't accidentally do stupid things, or I'm less likely to do stupid things. It probably does automatically round it. That's probably exactly what it's doing. Nice, thank you. That's probably what it's doing. So it's even smarter and better than what I thought it was. The the pre-compiler instruction, nope, it's just going to put a double there and you're screwed. It's going to break all over the place. So this is very old school. I'm old, so I'm still doing the old school way. This is the way to do constants nowadays. People stopped doing this way a little while ago, just like they do this nowadays, not the original way of doing this. So I've shown this before. I'll show it again. So this would be a pre-compile instruction. The other one is constant. Constants are the better way of doing things, but you should be able to play with both. Okay. Notice you can't tell the difference between the two of them. It's just capital letters. You know it's a constant. Good enough. This is the old way of doing things. If and def, and this thing is called test 2D array underscore h. That's by convention. If this is not defined, define it, and if. That's the old way of doing. You'll see this still in a lot of code bases. You'll see this still in a lot of code that people will give you. Why? Because it's not as easy to read, I guess, but it is it's the only thing that's guaranteed. The Pragma once isn't guaranteed to compile on all systems all the time. You're looking at an old compiler, certain operating systems, certain things like that. It may not work. This is guaranteed to work for all C code. This says if this random thing that I'm making up, this random term, test 2D array underscore h, is not defined. It's not. Then define it, do the rest of the stuff, include all the rest of the stuff, and here's the end of that if statement. So the next time I try and put this in, what happens? It says, is this thing defined? Yes, it is. Somebody already defined it. The last person that got to the header file defined that term. So skip all of this and stop. It's the same thing as pragma once. It means I only include it one time because I defined it on the first time, and then I check to see if it's defined all other times. So that's another way of doing that. There's all sorts of things that you can do with pre-compiler instructions. And that's sort of the fun. Like you can do things like, I'm going to do bit shifts here. I'm going to do a testing for, I can say something like this. Define is choose flag on. But more importantly, if that flag ended up being like, has the master sword, I could say, has the master sword as the question. Does player have the master sword or something like that? And it's just a bit flag. The compiler doesn't know it's a master sword. You know it's a master sword, but you don't want to have to remember, oh, well, it's a bit flag. Right. I just want this thing to actually work. So this is my set of flags I can do. And it might be something like this. Val and choose bit. That's what we had in that if statement. So I could have is choose flag on, and just, it's easier for a human to read that, but under the hood, it's doing all these bitwise operators on you. And I can do one more, let's say, and let's say choose off. And this is an and tilde and choose bit. I'm missing something here. No, that seems fine. All right. And everywhere I had, now I've got to get rid of this one here. So let's go back over my old code, what I had before, and hopefully it'll make a bit more sense when I show it to you. All right. That's one. Is a choose flag on? Yes or no? It's a yes or no question. It's true or false. I don't want to have to think about how it's implemented. I just want it. I just want the answer. And let's do this one here, which is choose off. There you go. And let's test this again. And then this is turning it back on again. Now, maybe it doesn't seem any easier, but you're actually trying to understand what the heck's going on versus if I read this to's flag, it maybe should be called to's flag on, to's flag off, something like that. I don't want to know how it's being done. I just sort of turn the flag on, turn the flag off, figure out if the flag is on or off, right? Do a test to see if the flag is on or off. That's what I want. I want it simple. All right. Don't know if that made it any simpler, but that's why we do pre-compilation and that sort of thing. We can do all sorts of things. We can also do things like if Mac build do this, else, and then we'll have an end if. Okay, and then I might have something like if I'm doing the Mac build of the game, I'm making a game for multiple different operating systems. The drawing functions are different depending on the operating system I'm dealing with. What I want is I want to hot swap out all the code that specifically relates to a Mac and stuff in the code that specifically relates to Windows on the fly. That'll do it. I check to see if I'm doing the Mac build at the time. If I'm doing the Mac build, I do this one. Otherwise, I do this one, and I'm done. If I have two different versions of a particular function, if I have two different libraries I'm including, am I in the Mac build? Okay. And so when I switch over and I go, okay, I need to do the Windows build. Okay, I'm now doing the Windows build. I don't have to do anything else. My code automatically takes that stuff, does a completely different build, builds it for a Windows machine, and I'm none the wiser. My code doesn't change. I just set a flag one place. I'm not even keeping in the Mac code because I can't. It'll explode. It won't compile. But it automatically gets ripped out. So I have no problem. I have a Mac version of this code, or I have an iOS version of this code, and I have an Android version of this code. Am I using ice cream sandwich? If so, do this. If I'm doing Android above this, do this. I can pull out chunks of my code by compiling it a particular way, just with its precompile instructions. That's why people use C++ still, because it's a pain in the bum to learn, but it's very effective at getting things done. It allows you to do things very efficiently. All right. Let's see here. This is just a demo. All right. I should be putting comments in my code. I should be using, by the way, other things that you might be looking for people. They should have prototypes if they should have prototypes. Let's just save all. Let's see here. This is actually technically the proper way of doing any kind of bracketing, any kind of if you want parentheses, if you want to use scope, different scopes. Even if it's only a single line, you should put the curly braces in. Personal perspective, but I think I'm justified in that personal perspective. And you don't put it on the same line. Same line is Java. Java and C++, they might look the same, but people have wars over this thing, whether it's this, it's going to keep on doing that for me, this or that. And you might think there's no difference, but a C programmer will say, no, that's wrong. And the Java programmer will say, no, what you have here is wrong. Look at all this extra space you take up. But they're both right. They just have a different view on this. So comments like this, comments on whether the variable names are good. whether it's laid out correctly, whether whether my for loop is overly complicated for no apparent reason. Right? It starts at 0, goes up to a number, I++. Keep it simple. Can I answer any additional questions? I'm going to save this, and so it's going to be automatically recorded for you guys. But I wanted to see if there's other things that are sort of sticking out for that are confusing you, because some people join later, some people might have new questions or don't want to say anything. You do not have to submit the code back. You can submit the code back. You can also have it as a PDF, I do believe. If you have it as, even if you submit the code back and I say take it as a PDF, print the PDF, print the C code as a PDF, like print to file and save it as a PDF. Easier to read for the graders. They're not running the code. It's not about code correctness. This is what every single coder goes through. It's a code review. If you go with an industry, which some people don't necessarily are not going to be coders. Yeah, you just review in a PDF. It's just fine. But if you go in industry, you will get other people's code and you'll be asked on a regular basis to review their code before it gets pushed to the main library, before it gets pushed out. So somebody else writes it and you have somebody else always review your code. And you could be reviewing the code of your manager. It could be anybody. You're constantly doing code reviews and you're giving feedback or advice on how they can improve things or what you liked about their code. This is just the first attempt at that. It's something to get used to because everyone makes mistakes. The whole point of a code review is that bad formatting, bad style, but also logic errors all get caught if you have a code review. Otherwise, you get this cowboy coding where everyone does everything that they want. And it does not work out well. I'll promise you that. All right. Other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to take my leave of you guys. I'm going to stop screen sharing for right now. All right. Okay, guys. So we have the exam coming up really late, the 21st. I did not pick the date. So please don't blame me about that one. I'm working on the exam right now. So I'll take bribes. No, I do not take bribes. I'm joking. So for trying line 62, something like that, I would say line 62 and then also what the code is, right? Maximize your ability to find that thing later, just in case they add 2 lines, then they can't find what you're talking about, right? The clearer it is, imagine if we're probably not going to give it back to the original authors of the code, right? It's a bit too, when you're just learning off, I don't want to be people bashing each other's code. But if you were to give it back to the authors, would they know exactly what you're talking about? Would they be able to use what your feedback is correctly? That's what you're wondering. So if you say line 62, the line might change. If you say this for loop on line 62, even if it's on 2-3 lines lower, they know it's the for loop on line 62. I'm now on line 65. Good enough. I know what we're looking for. What do you mean by will it be the same? Very similar format on CUlearn, unfortunately. There is no real avoiding that. It has to be an exam. It has to be online because it's an online class now, or it's a remote class now. And so all the limitations of CUlearn come to the fore. But officially, our line is that you're supposed to be using Visual Studio. Now, if you're not using Visual Studio, you need to figure out the workarounds. There's a big bunch of comments on the workarounds, I think in homework help right now, about how to get rid of the _S thing, but I like the _S. I've learned to like it. I've given up trying to fight it because it does prevent you from doing stupid crap, right? I'm comparing 2 strings, or I'm copying 2 things over from one. I'm copying an array over. I want to make sure I don't overflow or I don't go past the size of my buffer, the size of my array. That's what those _S's are for. They should be new standards coming up, but older compilers on other operating systems don't have that. So there are workarounds. They're listed up in the Discord channel for homework help that just came up today. So you can look at that as well. And yeah, if you get rid of the _s version of it and do the other versions, you should be fine. All right. Is that everything? Yes, and the exam will be on See You Learn. So it's 3-hour exam instead, unlike an hour and a half. So it can be a longer exam. It's covering anything and everything, but of course it gets more and more weighted to the end because the course builds on itself. Okay, I'm gonna go pick up my son now, so I will talk to you guys later. I will try and do another tutoring kind of thing closer to the exam, so that because you probably are studying for other things, not this course yet. So when we get closer to the exam, I'll try and do like some kind of study session, help session for you guys to help you out. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Cheers. Have a good day. Happy holidays. I don't get to talk to you before. Bye.